Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 51. The Path to Strength. Meanwhile, within the towering fortress inside the gates of the underworld, at the topmost platform, overlooking the grand gates, stood a figure clad entirely in ornate black armor. The figure's body was completely hidden beneath the metal, save for two sharp eyes peeking through the helmet's visor. "What a foolish child!" A voice that sounded neither male nor female murmured. Just as Ethan's foot was about to graze the barrier, the armored figure raised a hand with a casual flick. Boom! Ethan's body jolted violently before being launched into the air. He soared backward, the world around him a blur. The misty staircase, the fields of ethereal blooms, the black lake, the blood abyss, all of it zipped past him as he hurtled uncontrollably. He shot through the shimmering gap in the waterfall, the very one he had entered through. Then all went dark. Ember City General Hospital, ICU. Ethan lay motionless in the intensive care unit, his body unnaturally still, connected to an array of machines. Outside the glass window, Lila stood vigil, exhaustion etched into her pale face. For 3 days and nights, she hadn't slept. She simply remained there, staring at Ethan's lifeless body through the windowpane. "Miss Silverwood," a young nurse approached her, holding a clipboard. "The head physician wanted me to inform you, Mr. Carter's body functions have almost completely shut down. There's minimal brain activity, and his heartbeat is barely detectable. At most, he has 1 day left." The nurse hesitated before handing Lila the clipboard. "We need your signature here." Lila's trembling fingers took the clipboard. Her eyes blurred with tears as she read the bold header. Critical condition notification. Her chest tightened. She'd cried so much over the past few days that she thought she had no tears left. But seeing those words, fresh streams began flowing down her cheeks. She stared at the signature line, pen hovering over the paper. Her hand shook so violently that the pen pierced through the page. She couldn't bring herself to sign. A single teardrop fell, landing on the paper with a soft plop. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she steadied her hand. Just as the pen began tracing the first stroke of her name, a loud, droning noise pierced the air. Beep! The machines in the ICU began blaring alarms, their red lights flashing urgently. "Call the doctors! Hurry!" Lila shouted, shoving the clipboard into the nurse's hands before rushing to the window, her face pressed against the glass. Inside, chaos erupted. Every monitor in the room flashed red, the heart rate monitor displaying a flat green line. The doctors arrived quickly. Too quickly, it seemed, as they exited just as fast. Lila turned to the lead physician, her tear-streaked face brimming with desperate hope. But the man shook his head solemnly. Inside, the medical staff began shutting down the equipment. The flatline monitors were turned off one by one. Ethan's body was covered with a white sheet, signaling the end. "You can go in and say your goodbyes," the lead doctor said softly before turning to leave. But as he did, a series of shrill screams erupted from inside the ICU. "Ah! Ah!" Everyone froze. Lila clamped a hand over her mouth, her wide eyes glued to the scene before her. Then, without hesitation, she burst through the door, rushing inside. How is this possible?" the doctor stammered, rushing back in behind her. Ethan sat upright, dazed, his upper body exposed as the white sheet fell away. His eyes, once lifeless, now gleamed with renewed clarity. As Lila threw herself into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably, his gaze softened. Slowly, he reached up and stroked her hair. "Don't cry," he murmured. "See? I'm fine now. You scared me. You scared me to death." Lila cried, burying her face into his chest before fainting from sheer exhaustion. Ethan blinked, startled. Before he could react, the lead doctor stepped forward and quickly checked on her condition. "She's fine, just passed out. Poor girl hasn't slept or eaten for days," the doctor said, shaking his head. "Get her on a bed, hook up a nutrient for, and let her rest properly." The nurses hurried to follow his instructions, gently taking Lila from Ethan's arms. Mr. Carter, the doctor said, turning back to him with a look that made Ethan shudder. His gaze was unsettling, like a starving man eyeing a steak. Is something wrong? Ethan asked warily, feeling an inexplicable urge to cover his chest. We need to run some tests, the doctor replied, his tone far too eager. 3 days later, Ethan was finally released from the hospital. Yes, released. In those 3 days, the doctors had poked, prodded, scanned, and examined him to within an inch of his life. They seemed ready to cut him open and study him under a microscope. In the end, the results were baffling. Not only was Ethan perfectly healthy, but his physical condition was comparable to that of a world-class athlete in their prime. He walked out of the hospital with a clean bill of health, but not without a newfound appreciation for the word freedom. Lila was still weak from the ordeal of the past few days. Her body was fragile, her steps unsteady, and she clung tightly to Ethan's arm as they made their way back to the villa. She hadn't let go of him even once. I'll take you to your room so you can rest, Ethan said gently, glancing at her pale face. Okay, Lila murmured softly. Once she was settled in her room, Ethan ensured she was comfortable. The doctors had been clear. She needed proper rest and nourishment to recover fully. With Lila resting, Ethan finally had some time to himself. It was just past noon, and he still had the entire afternoon before he could log back into Ethereal. His mind drifted back to Morzen's cryptic words just after he was hurled out of the gates of the underworld. Your soul has grown too strong because of the ethereal blooms. Your body, however, hasn't kept up. Strengthen it, or the imbalance will cost you. Ethan had learned a lot from that brief conversation. The currents of energy from the VR capsule had been gradually enhancing his physical body. Still, Morzen had warned that the process wasn't enough. Ethan needed to bridge the gap between his powerful soul and his mortal body through rigorous physical training. Determined, Ethan hopped into the car and drove to a fitness equipment store, returning with bags full of gear and supplies. He wasted no time setting up a makeshift training area in the villa's spacious living room. He strapped a 10-kilogram weight vest to his torso, feeling the immediate strain on his legs. Let's see how far I can push this, he muttered. Hands clasped behind his head, Ethan lowered himself into a squat, then rose slowly. 1, 2, 10, 20. By the time he completed 50 squats, there wasn't even a hint of fatigue. Frowning, he grabbed 4 additional weights, increasing the load to 50 kilograms. 1, 2, 10. At 20, his legs trembled under the strain. Sweat poured down his face, his breaths coming in short, ragged bursts. Grabbing a nutrition shake from his earlier purchase, Ethan downed it in one go, resting for a few minutes. The fatigue quickly faded, replaced by a renewed sense of energy. Again, he said to himself, lowering into another round of squats. Despite the grueling effort, Ethan found himself impressed by his stamina and strength. Not long ago, the so-called Ice Queen, Celeste Hawthorne, had written him off as worthless, a title he now intended to erase entirely. In his past life, he had suffered alone, powerless and abandoned. But this life was different. He had Lila by his side, a happiness he had never known before. He would protect it at all costs, both in the real world and in Ethereal. And then there was the underworld. The strange warmth in that voice still lingered in his mind. It was unlike anything he'd ever felt before, filling a void he hadn't realized existed. He had to uncover the truth about the voice, about what had happened in the underworld, and about the powers Morzen hinted at. Strength is the only way forward, Morzen had said. In that brief return to Ethereal earlier, Morzen had revealed another unsettling truth. The game was far more than just a virtual escape. Hidden forces, powerful individuals, and secret factions operated in both the game and the real world, and they would stop at nothing to exploit its resources. If Ethan wanted to survive, he had to grow stronger. Otherwise, he and those he cared about would be nothing more than stepping stones for others. 1, 2, 3. In the living room, Ethan's labored breathing echoed with each rep. To him, this wasn't just physical training, it was a battle of will. It was why he had been able to complete the grueling quest, the Angel's Salvation, in the first place. The monotony of repetitive movements didn't bother him. He had always had resilience. Before, he lacked talent. But now he had both. 80, 90, 100. Sweat dripped onto the floor. His legs screamed in protest, every muscle burning. Yet his powerful soul kept him moving, its strength bolstering his will. 190, 200. With a guttural roar, Ethan's legs gave out, and he crashed onto the floor with a loud thud. He lay there, gasping for breath, staring at the ceiling as his heart pounded in his chest. Chapter 52. Strange Pendant. Bang! Ethan's door flew open with a crash, startling him out of his haze. At the doorway stood Lila, her face pale but filled with alarm. She spotted him sprawled on the floor and immediately rushed to his side. "What's wrong?" she asked, panicked. Wincing through the pain, Ethan forced himself to sit up. "I'm fine. Just overdid it with the workout." Lila's gaze swept over the room, taking in the assortment of fitness equipment strewn about. She exhaled deeply, holding back tears, and punched Ethan square in the chest. "Ow!" he gasped, clutching his ribs. For someone still recovering, her punch carried enough force to knock the wind out of him. If she had been at full strength, Ethan was certain she could have broken a few bones. It always surprised him how much power Lila could pack into her tiny frame. He knew she was capable, but he never imagined how intense her training must have been. What Ethan didn't know was that after he left her behind as a child, Lila had immersed herself in learning combat and self-defense, eventually undergoing systematic training to become the formidable woman she was now. Noticing his grimace, Lila softened. Realizing she'd gone too far, she quickly helped him to his feet. After some rest and another round of nutrient shakes, Ethan's strength began to recover. But his stomach growled loudly. Nutrient shakes weren't exactly filling. Neither of them felt like cooking, so they opted for the ultimate solution, ordering a home delivery. By the time they finished their meal, it was evening, and the game servers were about to go online. Lila wasn't thrilled about Ethan logging back in so soon. "Are you sure this is a good idea? You just recovered," she said, crossing her arms. "I'll be fine, I promise," Ethan said, coaxing her with reassurances until she finally relented. As he prepared to enter his game capsule, a thought struck him. He turned to Lila with a puzzled expression. "Hey Lila, how did you even get my game pod open in the first place? It's supposed to be fully locked and blast-proof." "At first I couldn't," she admitted. "But then, I don't know, I just touched it, and it opened on its own." Ethan frowned, pondering her response. Could this have been Morzen's doing? It was the only explanation that made sense. Back in Ethereal. Ding. System notification. Offline XP bonus has accumulated to 98.8% of your current level. Bonus will automatically apply when killing monsters. Offline time. 9 days, 18 hours, 23 minutes. Ethan froze. 9 days? It hit him. His time in the underworld had counted as being offline in Ethereal. Then he remembered the ethereal blooms he'd been harvesting. Opening his character panel, he exhaled in relief. His levels were intact, and his bag was still full of ethereal blooms. But then he remembered something else, the black pendant. He searched through his equipment and inventory but came up empty. It wasn't there. Frowning, Ethan logged out of the game and went straight to Lila's room, knocking on her door. "What's up?" she asked, opening the door slightly. "Did you see a black pendant anywhere?" Ethan asked. Well." Lila hesitated, her face betraying guilt. Ethan raised a brow but gestured for her to take her time. "It's fine. Just tell me." Sighing, Lila muttered, "All right, fine." She lowered her head, tugged at her collar, to reveal the pendant nestled just beneath her shirt. "It's here. Take it," she said, pouting slightly as her cheeks turned pink. Ethan's jaw dropped. "Wait, you mean it's there? And I have to? What are you gawking at? I can't get it off on my own. Just take it already." Lila snapped, her blush deepening. Ethan couldn't help but laugh internally at her command. This situation felt absurdly awkward yet amusing. "Well, if you insist," he said, suppressing a smirk as he reached out. His hand touched nothing but her soft boobs. Lila shuddered and let out a soft gasp. "Ah, you pervert. Ethan, you jerk," she yelped, recoiling in surprise. Wham! Before Ethan could react, Lila delivered a kick that literally sent him flying out of her room. He crashed into the hallway wall, sliding to the floor with a groan. Ethan sat up, rubbing his back with a wry grin. "She's got a mean kick. I'll give her that." He sat stunned for a moment before snapping to his feet and charging back to Lila's door. His frustration boiled over as he shouted. "Didn't you tell me to grab it myself? Why'd you kick me?" "I didn't," Lila said, her voice trembling with hurt. What do you mean you didn't? You literally told me to grab it, and the next thing I know, I'm flying across the hallway. Ethan retorted, his anger mounting. He was getting tired of her recent habit of hitting him, and the fact that he couldn't fight back. I said I didn't kick you. Lila shot back, her voice cracking as her eyes filled with tears. Why are you yelling at me? Ethan froze. Seeing her reaction, he realized he might have gone too far. Taking a deep breath, he lowered his voice. Okay, I'm sorry. If it wasn't you, then what? Did I just launch myself out the door? He hadn't meant to snap at her. After all, getting flung into the hallway for no apparent reason had left him rattled. It wasn't me, Lila said again, her voice soft. It was this. She stepped closer to him, pointing at her chest. Ethan blinked, his brain short-circuiting as his gaze inadvertently shifted to the area she was gesturing toward. For a brief moment he was struck dumb. Wait, what is happening right now? She was close enough that he could see every detail of her flushed face, and his mind began to spiral. Lila, he stammered, his voice shaky. If you're trying to, make a point, you don't have to. Not that. Look here, Lila snapped, her cheeks practically glowing as she pointed to a spot just above her collarbone. Wait, what? Ethan's focus shifted to where she was pointing. That pendant of yours, she said, exasperated. The black one you had when you woke up. It flew onto me, and now I can't get it off. Ethan frowned, suddenly serious. It flew onto you? What are you talking about? Lila sighed. Right after you woke up, I came in to talk to you. The pendant was on your chest, and before I could even say a word, it flew right onto me. I passed out, and when I woke up, it was here, she explained, tapping the spot again. It even changed, it's white now, but no matter how much I try, I can't take it off. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he processed her words. He hadn't noticed any pendant on him when he woke up, let alone one that could fly. Yet Lila's expression was too genuine for him to dismiss. Wait, he said, stepping closer. Are you sure it's still there? Of course I'm sure. Here, see for yourself, Lila replied, pointing to the spot again. Cautiously, Ethan reached out and ran his fingers over the area she indicated. He felt nothing but her soft skin. No pendant, no texture, nothing. Lila, I don't see or feel anything, he said, his brow furrowed. What? How is that possible? Lila looked genuinely surprised. She glanced down at her chest, frowning as if she could still see or sense the object. Ethan thought back to Morzen's warnings and the supernatural nature of the underworld. He sighed, realizing there might be forces at play far beyond his comprehension. Well, if it's invisible to me but harmless to you, and it can apparently protect you, I guess it's fine for you to keep it, he said finally. Lila fiddled with the invisible object, her fingers gripping at something Ethan couldn't see. She tugged at it a few times before giving up. All right, Ethan said, turning to leave. Stop messing with it, though. It's not going anywhere. I'm heading back to my room. Fine. But seriously, what is this thing? Lila called after him. Ethan paused at the door, shaking his head. I don't know either. He shut her door and returned to his room, sliding into his game pod.
Chapter 53, à surprise windfall.
Back in the VR capsule, Ethan brought his hand to his nose and sniffed. A sweet, floral scent lingered, one that carried a hint of feminine allure. A grin spread across his face before he finally logged back into the game. Loading. Entering the game. The progress bar finished, but Ethan's screen remained black, his vision still adjusting. His thoughts drifted back to the two figures he had gripped earlier, their presence like twin roses swaying in the breeze, delicate, tempting, utterly captivating. The tantalizing feel was enough to incite any man's desire. A rapid series of chimes pulled him out of his daze. What the? Who's blowing up my inbox like this? Ethan opened his inbox and scrolled through the flood of messages. They were all from Skyblade. The first read, Boss, where've you been? It's been 10 days since you logged in, and you dropped out as soon as you came on earlier. The second, Boss, if you don't show up soon, we're all gonna get wiped out. And the third, You're back? Finally. We're at coordinates 32465.59.872.6551. Hurry, we need backup. Ethan typed back a quick reply. You guys already left the starter zone? The message had barely sent when Skyblade's response popped up almost instantly. The three of us hit level 15 already. We've got over 300 guild members in Harmony City now. Boss, you have to come. We're getting boxed in by Marcus Skaner and his crew. Hearing that name, Ethan's expression darkened. Marcus Skaner, the infamous leader of the Blade Syndicate, Harmony City's #1 guild in his previous life. Blade Syndicate had its roots in an old MMO game, but whatever respect it once commanded had long since withered. These days, Blade Syndicate was nothing more than a band of toxic, glory-chasing idiots who thrived on griefing others. By the time they migrated to Ethereal, they were nothing more than a band of troublemakers who thrived on ruining everyone else's experience. Their signature move? Ganking low-level players en masse and running away the moment the tide turned against them. If outnumbered, they'd flee without hesitation. If a boss fight required teamwork, they'd scatter like headless flies. They'd exploit bugs, cheat the system, and leave behind a trail of chaos and misery. Despite their incompetence, they somehow managed to recruit thousands of like-minded trolls into one guild. Ethan could never understand it. One or two dimwits. Sure, that was par for the course. But to gather thousands of them in one place, all with the same abysmal level of skill. That was a feat of collective idiocy unmatched in gaming history. Ethan vividly remembered his own encounter with them during his past life. It was in the starter zone. A Blade Syndicate squad had joined his party for a raid on the Murky Swamp. They spent an entire night trying, and failing to defeat the Ancient Tree King, the dungeon's most basic boss. By the time dawn broke, their party leader, in sheer frustration, rage quit the raid, leaving the rest of them stranded. The memories were humiliating. Ethan could still hear the leader's shouts. Position to the left. What the hell are you doing spinning in circles? Hold your ground at the choke point. Why are you hiding behind the healers? Stop running into the group with an exploding debuff. It was less of a raid party and more of a synchronized display of collective idiocy. And yet, somehow this clown fiesta persisted. But Marcus Skaner wasn't their only problem. Ethan remembered another guild, Judgment. Initially, they were rivals to Blade Syndicate, but it didn't take long for them to fold. Judgment quickly devolved into glorified snitches, leaking the coordinates of their own guild players to Blade Syndicate for favors. Back then, they were infamous for being traitors, mercenaries for hire with no sense of honor. Ethan couldn't help but smirk as he thought about the nickname they earned, the Backstabbers. In Ethereal, the reason Blade Syndicate managed to dominate Harmony City as its top guild wasn't due to skill or strategy, it was because they had numbers. And numbers came from money. Lots of it. The kind of guild full of rich idiots who spent their way to the top. Ethan had long suspected that Blade Syndicate had backing from some shadowy corporate group. Perhaps even Zachary and his crew. The thought made his jaw tighten as he sprinted toward the coordinates Skyblade had sent him, memories of his past life bubbling to the surface. Survivor faction has to deal with Blade Syndicate here, he mused. I wonder if the Carnage faction has its own version? He wouldn't have known in his past life. Back then, his latter days were spent toiling away in an abandoned mine, and he didn't even gain the qualification to participate in cross-faction wars. This time around, Ethan had logged back in right outside Harmony City's gates, which made his journey to the teleportation hub quick and efficient. Skyblade's coordinates pointed to a spot near Cogden Village, a small outpost where Ethan vaguely remembered delivering a side quest to a young NPC girl. The village bordered a hunting zone filled with level 15 to 20 monsters, perfect for grinding after leaving the starter zone. Just as Ethan arrived at the teleportation hub, a flickering envelope icon above the mailbox nearby caught his eye. Mail? Who's sending me mail? Curiosity piqued. Ethan veered off course and opened the mailbox. To his surprise, the sender was Trusty 007. For a moment he froze, memories snapping into focus. Right, he had worked out a deal with Trusty before venturing into the necrotic domain. Worried that something might go wrong, Ethan had given him a detailed guide for delivering it. Guess it worked out after all. Excitement thrummed through Ethan's veins as he opened the mail. Ding. System alert. You've received 14,256 gold coins. What they? Ethan stared at the number, dumbfounded. That much gold. Attached to the mail was a note from Trusty 007. Big boss, we've hit the jackpot. This is the total revenue from selling your guide across 2,000 starter zones in the Northern Frontier region. We sold 7,129 copies in total. One of those was to Skyblade from Renegade Alliance, but I didn't charge him since, he's one of yours. That leaves 7,128 paid copies, bringing in 14,256 gold coins. I've also sold guides in other regions where gold couldn't be transferred, so I converted it to cash and deposited it into your bank account. We sold 3,562 copies there, at the current rate of $1,800 per gold coin. Total cash transfer, $12,823,200. This is the most profitable deal we've ever done. If you've got another guide in the works, let me know. There's already demand for the next copy. Ethan nearly jumped for joy as he finished reading. 14,000 gold and over 12 million in cash. If he sold off the gold at market rates, he'd have nearly $40 million total in his account. All this from a single dungeon guide for a starter zone. He couldn't help but smile at Trusty's enthusiasm. It was clear the guy had made some decent amount himself, though Ethan didn't bother wondering how much Trusty charged per guide. He had only asked for 2 gold per copy and wasn't about to get greedy. With a spring in his step, Ethan walked onto the teleportation platform and selected Cogden Village as his destination. The cost of 1 copper for the teleport barely registered. It was a drop in the ocean now. Chapter 54. The Fight for Survival. As Ethan traveled through the winding forest paths, he kept asking Skyblade for details. It turned out that right after they had left the starter zone, they encountered members of the Blade Syndicate. Ethan had been offline for days, and his level had stagnated at 15, gradually slipping down the leaderboard. Blade Syndicate, seeing members of the Renegade Alliance, couldn't resist mocking them. Your guild leader's lost his edge. Without exploiting bugs, he's just a washed-up nobody. They jeered, their taunts escalating into direct confrontation. At first, it was only verbal abuse, but soon enough, Blade Syndicate resorted to sneak attacks. They targeted isolated members of the guild, especially those returning from supply runs. A few unfortunate members were ambushed and taken down. Skyblade, furious, rallied dozens of guild members to retaliate against Blade Syndicate's force of over 100 players. Predictably, their players, relying more on sheer numbers than skill, were no match for the coordinated assault. While Renegade Alliance suffered minor losses, the fight ended in a decisive victory with over 100 Blade Syndicate members wiped out. And so, the war began. Over the past 2 days, fights of various sizes erupted countless times. The relentless attacks had severely slowed Renegade Alliance's progress. Many members had not only failed to level up after leaving the starter zone but had even dropped back to level 14, forcing them to retreat to the zone for protection. Although players at level 15 benefited from the starter zone's protection system, which revived them directly at the graveyard without losing a level, the weakness penalty that followed each death wasted precious time. Worse, if a player died more than 10 times, the protection system ceased to function. Some members had already hit that limit. Being targeted by such persistent harassment was frustrating, significantly hindering the guild's growth. Ethan's prolonged absence didn't help either, prompting some members to quit the guild. While leaving incurred steep penalties, losing contribution points and guild-issued gear, players retained their levels and could continue progressing, albeit more slowly, with basic Iron Tier equipment. Hearing Skyblade's recounting, Ethan frowned. Was Blade Syndicate targeting them because he had drawn too much attention to the guild? In his memory, Blade Syndicate's players were obnoxious, but they had never focused on any particular group. Their usual behavior was forming large groups to bully low-level players or ganging up on lone targets. They rarely confronted guilds or organized groups head-on. If met with resistance, they scattered like cowards, looking for easier prey. This current strategy was completely out of character for them. Ethan opened the leaderboard, scanning the rankings. Blade Syndicate was now a level 4 guild, sitting firmly at the top of the regional leaderboard. Advancing a guild to level 3 required obtaining a guild base, something money alone couldn't buy. It required a guild team to clear dungeons and accumulate points, which could then be exchanged for a basic guild base in the main city. With Blade Syndicate's usual incompetence, there was no way they could have achieved this through their own efforts. In his past life, they had always hired professional players to join their guild temporarily and earn the required points for them. Each time their guild base was upgraded, it followed the same pay-to-win formula. Leveling a guild from 2 to 3 also cost 1,000 gold, expanding its capacity to 5,000 members. Reaching level 4 required 5,000 gold and expanded the capacity to 10,000 members. In the early stages of the game, 6,000 gold was no small sum. Converted to real-world currency, it equaled a staggering $10.8 million. Ethan found it hard to believe that Marcus Skaner, the leader of Blade Syndicate, could afford such an amount on his own. In his past life, rumors had circulated that while Marcus had some wealth in the real world, he was far from rich enough to casually throw millions into upgrading a guild. As they approached the outskirts of the battlefield, Skyblade updated Ethan on the situation. Marcus himself had brought over 1,500 members to surround their force of barely 200 players. Those 200 represented Renegade Alliance's strongest players, the core group that had managed to reach the main city after days of relentless battles. They were the veterans of Zone 1370 battle and had followed Skyblade, Slashblade, and Seraph Warrior through the treacherous Murky Swamp dungeon, earning gear and experience that set them apart from the average player. Currently, the typical player level hovered between 13 and 14, but this elite group had leveled up significantly faster. Despite their numerical disadvantage, the 200 Renegade Alliance members had managed to evade a full encirclement thanks to the poor coordination of Blade Syndicate's players. Under Skyblade's leadership, they had been weaving through enemy forces, launching counterattacks, and breaking out of traps. Still, the overwhelming numbers were taking their toll. The day before, the battles raged until the game servers shut down, leaving the Alliance's forces severely weakened. If things continued like this, it was only a matter of time before they were completely surrounded and wiped out. Even Seraph Warrior, who had always been a resilient fighter, had died 11 times. He had barely enough experience left to avoid dropping a level after another death. If he fell again, he'd be forced to return to the starter zone to grind back to level 15 before he could rejoin the fight. As they pressed onward, Ethan noticed groups of players from other guilds and some unaffiliated rogues lurking nearby. Their stealth abilities, due to their lower levels, were entirely ineffective against Ethan's sharp eyes. Most of them were inching toward the battlefield, recording videos for their own entertainment. But the oddest sight was a group of players led by a striking woman holding a microphone purchased from the in-game store. She appeared to be live streaming. "Everyone look! Past the forest behind me is Larson Basin, where Renegade Alliance's elite forces are reportedly trapped. This is a battle of overwhelming odds. Who will emerge victorious?" Rumors suggest that the Renegade Alliance leader, once a dominant figure on the leaderboard, hasn't logged in for 10 days due to a real-life tragedy. Without his leadership, can they achieve the same glory they did during the Zone 1370 battle? Follow me as we witness the action unfold. This is WCC News bringing you live coverage from the world of Ethereal. I'm your host, Trina Starr. Ethan couldn't help but curse under his breath as he passed by. Real-life tragedy? You wish. Your whole family wishes. He nearly burst out laughing when he heard the ridiculous name she used for her channel. WCC? Why not just call it WC? And her name, Trina Starr, sounded so forced it was almost comical. Still, her broadcast revealed one crucial piece of information. Larson Basin. Skyblade and the others, clearly disoriented from the constant battles, had no idea where they were. They had been relaying coordinates to Ethan without realizing their exact location. But now that Ethan had heard it, his memory of the terrain came flooding back. His eyes gleamed with a sudden idea. Ethan sent a message to Skyblade, urging them to hold their ground and avoid getting fully surrounded. He also forwarded them a set of coordinates, instructing them to make their way toward that location. "Blade Syndicate," Ethan muttered, a sharp grin spreading across his face. "You want to play the numbers game? Fine. Let's see who has more fun." Chapter 55, Only 5 People Needed. Larson Basin was a peculiar region. Apart from a small plain at its very center, the rest of it was densely forested, making it a natural labyrinth. This was precisely why Skyblade and his crew had avoided being completely surrounded all this time. Ethan could already predict Blade Syndicate's plan. Their forces were likely scattered across the basin, stationed like a spiderweb, ready to catch any stray members of Renegade Alliance. If any squad or camp was discovered, reinforcements from all directions would rush to that point, creating the illusion of an inescapable siege. Skyblade and his men were likely darting through the basin in panic, changing direction constantly to evade capture, falling deeper into Blade Syndicate's trap. It was a clever tactic: send small teams to stall the renegades, then overwhelm them as more reinforcements arrived. But the basin was vast, and while Blade Syndicate had over 1,500 players deployed, spreading them out had thinned their defenses. They underestimated the 200 members of the Renegade Alliance. Ethan figured Marcus Skaner, the leader of Blade Syndicate, was already mobilizing additional reinforcements. Once those reinforcements arrived, Skyblade and the others would be in serious trouble. Ethan had already encountered multiple Blade Syndicate scouts on his way here, undoubtedly part of Marcus's backup. The coordinates Ethan sent to Skyblade marked an area near a cliff, a natural dead end within the basin. The location was perfect. It was deep in the basin, surrounded by sheer rock walls on one side, making it the only truly inescapable spot. Unlike the other directions, which had gradual slopes and forest paths leading out, this place was a deadlock. No sane strategist would station their troops there. As Ethan made his way toward the cliff, passing several ambush points hidden within the forest, his theory proved accurate. The closer he got to the cliff, the fewer Syndicate players he encountered. Eventually, there were none at all, not even a single scout. When he finally reached the area, he spotted some sentries hidden among the trees. To his relief, they weren't Syndicate players, they were renegades. It seemed Skyblade's team had made it. Ethan smirked. Skyblade knew what he was doing after all. Placing sentries here was a smart move, given how dangerous the situation was. Surviving this long against such overwhelming numbers was no small feat. In his past life, Skyblade had spent years working alongside Ethan, but his potential had been wasted under poor leadership. Stepping out of the forest, Ethan found himself in a small clearing. In the middle of it, a modest pond shimmered under the dim sunlight, its surface still and reflective. Beyond the pond was the cliff face, imposing and unscalable. Over 200 renegade members were camped near the water, their presence filling the air with tension. Ethan exited stealth mode, returning to his human form, and stepped into their line of sight. The reaction was instantaneous. Weapons were drawn in perfect unison. The sheer intensity of their collective glare hit Ethan like a wave. The air seemed to buzz with an almost tangible killing intent, a focused energy that was overwhelming. Ethan froze for a moment, genuinely impressed. This group of 200 fighters had managed to form a unified aura, a rare phenomenon in large-scale battles. In the late stages of the game, only the most disciplined warbands could achieve this level of synchronization. And here they were, already showing glimpses of such potential. This was the foundation of a true battle-hardened force. With their presence, the Renegade Alliance could mold new recruits into disciplined warriors, creating an army capable of holding its own against the world's strongest guilds. On any battlefield, a group like this would crush an equally equipped and numbered enemy force lacking such cohesion. The moment the first charge landed, an unorganized squad would collapse like sand under a tidal wave. Snapping out of his thoughts, Ethan smiled and stepped forward. The tension eased as the group recognized him. Their faces lit up with excitement. Even though Ethan rarely showed up, his leadership was the heart of the Renegade Alliance. His decisive actions during the legendary Battle of Zone 1370 had solidified his reputation. To these players, Ethan was their anchor. The crowd restrained themselves, but the guild chat was alive with chatter. "Guild leader is here. Finally. I thought you were never coming back, boss. Guild leader, we missed you. Now that you're here, let's tear Blade Syndicate apart." Dozens of excited messages poured in, each one brimming with enthusiasm. "Quiet down. Let's see what the bosses planned first," Skyblade typed in the chat. The guild channel fell silent instantly. It was clear Skyblade's authority within the group was second only to Ethan's. Ethan typed a few words of thanks in the guild chat, short and polite, without mentioning any specifics about his battle plans. He couldn't assume every guild member was trustworthy. There could easily be spies, either Blade Syndicate operatives or agents from rival guilds. Identifying them was impossible for now. Instead, he created a private chat group with Skyblade, Slashblade, and Seraph Warrior. The three exchanged glances, quickly realizing the importance of this private conversation. "Do we have a trustworthy warlock in our ranks?" Ethan asked bluntly. Slashblade paused for a moment before pointing to a boy among the group, looking no older than 15 or 16. In the private chat, Slashblade wrote, "His name is Meatball. He joined on the first day we founded the guild. He's been with us ever since, leveling up, running dungeons, always reliable. I trust him." First day? Ethan nodded in approval. It was unlikely for a guild mole to have been planted that early, especially a teenager. Such a young recruit wouldn't normally be chosen for a spy. "Ask him if he's learned the aquatic breathing skill," Ethan instructed. After a moment, Slashblade replied, "He has." "Good. Disband your party and have him leave his too." "I'll invite you all into mine," Ethan said. Skyblade and the others gave their orders in the group, then disbanded their party. Ethan quickly sent invitations to Skyblade, Slashblade, Seraph Warrior and Meatball, forming a 5-man team. We also need an archer with the Swift Stride skill. Someone reliable, Ethan added. Seraph Warrior hesitated before speaking in the private chat. That's tough. Swift Stride is a level 15 skill, and the drop rate for the skill book is ridiculously low. We've been getting harassed by those Blade Syndicate idiots non-stop, so we haven't been able to grind enough monsters for it. Ethan frowned but wasn't surprised. Skills above level 15 were notoriously rare, and under their current circumstances, finding someone with the ability was a long shot. Realizing the party would remain one member short, Ethan decided to move forward regardless. You've been here for over 20 minutes, right? That should mean everyone's out of combat now. Have the rest of the team use return stones to teleport back to the city. Tell them to unequip their guild crests and hide their usernames. Once that's done, have them regroup at the basin's outskirts and wait for further instructions. Ethan ordered Skyblade. What? Just like that? Seraph Warrior blurted out, clearly shocked. What will the others think? Before Ethan could answer, Skyblade had already followed the order, sending a message to the guild chat. The chat immediately exploded. Guild leader, we've been holed up here for days, fighting non-stop, and now you want us to retreat? Yeah, let's just go all in. We're not afraid of dying. Worst case scenario, we respawn at the starter zone. What the hell? I thought the guild leader was supposed to lead us to victory. Turns out he's just a coward. The notifications came rapidly after that. Ding, ding, ding. Several players left the guild in protest. Ethan stared at the messages silently. After a moment, the guild chat calmed as no more players quit. Then he typed a simple sentence. This fight only requires the 5 of us. Silence. The guild chat fell completely still. 8 words. Yet they carried a weight that stunned everyone. Some players wondered if they had misread it. 200 players had spent days struggling to survive, failing to break free from the Syndicate's pursuit. And now their guild leader claimed that 5 people would be enough? Then it hit them. The combat disengagement timer. In Ethereal, players locked in PvP combat had to avoid any hostile actions for over 20 minutes to be considered out of combat. The realization dawned on them. The guild leader's plan had worked. By directing them to this coordinate and stalling for time, he'd ensured that everyone was no longer under combat restrictions. They could now safely use their return stones. He hadn't just said those words to sound cool. With nothing more than a single coordinate, he had freed them all. As this sank in, the expressions of the remaining players began to shift. The anger and frustration faded, replaced by awe and admiration. They looked at Ethan with a new fire in their eyes.
Chapter 56, Secret Passage.
In no time, the remaining guild members activated their return stones and disappeared from the area. After 2 days of continuous combat, they had long passed the cooldown period for using the stones. Now only Ethan and his 4 companions remained by the pond. Ethan glanced at the group, taking note of their varied expressions. Skyblade looked positively thrilled, his excitement practically bursting out of him. Clearly, Ethan's earlier words, "This fight only requires the 5 of us," had ignited a fire in him. Ethan knew him too well. Skyblade was the kind of hot-blooded youth who could be roused to action with just one sentence. Slashblade maintained his usual stony demeanor, unreadable as ever. If he had any strong opinions about their suicidal-sounding mission, he didn't show it. Seraph Warrior, however, wore his doubts on his face. He clearly found the idea of 5 players taking on 1,500 hard to swallow. Then there was Meatball, the youngest of the group. His round face showed a mix of fear and exhilaration. He was clearly nervous but also thrilled to be chosen by Ethan for this mission. Ethan chuckled when his eyes landed on Meatball. The kid was a warlock class, but he was nothing like the typical image people associated with the class. Most people expected warlocks to have a sinister air, tall, thin, draped in dark, ominous robes, their outfits often featuring deep red or black tones. They were portrayed with oversized hoods, and an aura of mystery and dread. The warlock players in the game had a similar intimidating vibe. Most players leaned into the stereotype, mimicking the style. But Meatball? He was the complete opposite. Chubby and fair-skinned, he gave more of a younger brother vibe than a dark sorcerer. To top it off, he wore black-rimmed glasses, frames only, no lenses, adding to his harmless appearance. And then there was his outfit. Instead of the usual warlock attire, his gear had been transmogged into something absurdly wholesome. Transmogrification was a premium feature in the game, allowing players to alter their gear's appearance to suit their tastes. But it wasn't cheap. First, you needed to buy outfit templates, which were essentially virtual skins sold at absurd prices in the in-game clothing store. Clearly, Meatball came from money. Ethan could only sum him up in 5 words. Chubby kid in black glasses. Ethan let out a small laugh. Alright, it's just us now. Let's get started. How are we doing this, boss? Just say the word. Skyblade said, practically vibrating with anticipation. Ethan shot him a pointed look. First off, you need to follow orders. No charging in without thinking. He directed the remark at Skyblade specifically. Ethan knew him all too well. Once the fighting started, Skyblade had a bad habit of losing his head and going full berserk. Got it. Got it. Skyblade nodded enthusiastically. Ethan continued, we're going to be racking up a lot of red names after this. It'll be a long time before we can safely return to any city. Doesn't matter. Skyblade interrupted. We'll have the guild supply us in the field. Who needs cities anyway? Ethan ignored him and turned to Slashblade. If Skyblade interrupts me one more time, feel free to invite your sister to hang out with him tomorrow. Slashblade nodded without hesitation. Understood. Skyblade opened his mouth, but whatever he was about to say died in his throat. Ethan smirked at the sight and addressed the group. Alright, no need to be nervous. Meatball, your job is to apply aquatic breathing to everyone but me. Slashblade, you focus on healing and dispelling debuffs, especially anything that slows or roots us. The rest of you stay close to me. I assume you know how to swing a weapon. The group nodded, but the mention of aquatic breathing left them puzzled. They couldn't figure out why a water-breathing buff would be relevant to a fight. Still, Meatball quickly cast the spell on the team, blue runes circling each member as the buff activated. When he turned to Ethan to apply it to him, Ethan waved him off. I don't need it, Ethan said, before leaping into the pond without another word. Follow me, he shouted back. The group exchanged confused looks. What was this? Wasn't this supposed to be a fight? Why were they suddenly going for a swim? Hesitantly, they followed him into the water. Aquatic breathing grants the ability to breathe underwater, increases swimming speed by 20%. Duration, 20 minutes. As they submerged, they looked around but couldn't spot Ethan. Instead, a seal circled them. Follow me. Ethan's voice came through the party chat. The group finally realized the seal was Ethan. At level 20, Ethan's skill, Transform, Stag Form, had automatically upgraded to Transform, Travel Form. Transform, Travel Form. On land, transform into a stag, capable of carrying 1 passenger. Movement speed increased by 200%. In water, transform into a seal. Swimming speed equals or exceeds base movement speed. In flying zones, transform into an eagle. Flight speed increased by 500%. Travel form was one of the perks of being a druid. Even before the game introduced mounts, druids could enjoy enhanced mobility for free. While other players had to spend gold to learn riding skills and buy mounts, druids could transform and outrun most ground mounts without spending a dime. And this wasn't limited to just land. With forms for land, sea, and air, druids had unparalleled versatility. For regular players, entering the water reduced movement speed to 40%. Even with the aquatic breathing buff, it only increased to 60%. But Ethan's swimming speed, boosted by travel form, remained at 110%, meaning he had to frequently stop and wait for the others to catch up. About 30 meters underwater, Ethan paused by a cave entrance. This way, follow me, he directed through the party chat. The group entered the underwater cavern, the narrow path forcing them to swim single file. They encountered countless branching paths along the way, but Ethan scouted ahead at every turn, returning to guide them down the correct route. After nearly 10 minutes of navigating the labyrinthine tunnels, they finally emerged into another pond, breaking through a new exit. Ethan gestured for them to wait. Without explaining, he submerged again and swam toward the surface alone. At about 3 meters from the waterline, he activated Transform, Panther Form, and entered stealth mode before slowly ascending further. The moment he reverted from Panther Form, the game's breathing timer appeared, a countdown bar indicating how long he could stay underwater without air. Just as the timer reached halfway, Ethan broke through the surface. As soon as his head emerged, He spotted a small campsite near the water's edge. About 50 players were stationed there. It's been almost half an hour. Where the hell are those Renegade Alliance guys? One player asked irritably. How should I know? Another snapped. They probably used their return stones already. Combat cooldown expired over 20 minutes ago. If I were them, I'd have done the same, said a player with a bit of common sense. Exactly. I don't get why the guild leader has us sitting around here. Let's just go find some low-level players to kill. Way more fun. Another chimed in, clearly annoyed. Ethan silently observed the camp. The composition of the group was telling. Most of them were priests, with only a few damage dealers standing guard. Priests, with their slower movement speed, weren't suited for mobile operations. Their presence here likely meant this was a support unit, stationed to respond to orders and provide backup when needed. Ethan began clearing the area of potential threats, starting with a few rogues lurking in stealth. He even dealt with 2 druids in panther form, their stealth rendered useless against him. Thanks to several pieces of gear that enhanced his stealth detection, Ethan could easily spot their faint outlines within 5 meters. Even without the gear, his level advantage, 7 levels higher, meant their stealth was practically ineffective against him. Meanwhile, the rest of his team had crept up just below the water's surface, hovering less than 10 centimeters beneath. Pressed against the pond's edge, they waited for Ethan's signal. Even Meatball had summoned his demonic guardian, the towering creature poised for action, awaiting orders. Once Ethan confirmed all hidden threats had been eliminated, he typed a single word in the party chat. Attack. Chapter 57. Wiped in 3 minutes. 4 figures sprang into action instantly. Skyblade led the charge, closing the distance to the group gathered by the shore in the blink of an eye. With a shield bash, he floored one of the players in the crowd, following up with a flurry of attacks. Heroic Strike, Death Blow, and Colossus Smash. Each hit landed cleanly, carving away half the warrior's health in mere seconds. The group had been laughing and exchanging gists, blissfully unaware of the storm about to descend on them. Whoa, look at Dumbace getting pounded, someone jeered. Serves him right. He probably hit on another guildie's girlfriend. Another chimed in, their tone laced with mockery. But as Skyblade's relentless assault reduced Dumbace's health to dangerous levels, one of them finally noticed something was off. Wait a second. That's Skyblade from Renegade Alliance. The name alone was enough to shake them out of their stupor. They immediately drew their weapons in a panic, but it was too late. Skyblade stomped his foot with a thundering roar, unleashing Thunder Stomp, which shook the ground. Lightning crackled outward, immobilizing everyone nearby with a 3-second stun. And then it appeared, a towering demonic guardian wielding dual greatswords. With an inhuman roar, it charged into the stunned crowd, its devastating blade storm sweeping through them. The demonic guardian spun in place, its blades carving through flesh and armor with terrifying precision. Players caught within its 4-meter reach could only watch helplessly as their health bars plummeted. Damn it! Skyblade spat, landing an execution skill on Dumbace that instantly reduced him to 0 health. He dropped to the ground, crouching just in time to avoid the spinning blades, the demonic guardian's whirlwind attack slicing through the air above him. Cold sweat ran down Skyblade's back. If he had hesitated even for a moment, he would have been shredded like minced meat. Not far off, Seraph Warrior had paused mid-charge. Turning to glance behind him, he shouted, "Meatball! Get that damn demon under control before it wipes us all out." On the shoreline, Meatball, true to his name, bore the appearance of a bloated chicken as he replied through the team chat, "I can't. I can only command it to attack or retreat. The rest depends on its AI, it's above my control level. You've got to get out of there yourself." "You!" Skyblade began, but before he could finish, Seraph Warrior had already plunged into the fray on the opposite side of the field. Shockwave, Judgment, Leaping Strike. One enemy fell, then another, as Seraph Warrior's massive greatsword delivered merciless justice. Skyblade gritted his teeth, remembering their earlier wager about who would rack up the most kills. He quickly crawled out of the demonic guardian's blade storm range, intent on reclaiming his lead. But just as he prepared to charge, he realized that Meatball's demon had already stolen 6 kills in its opening strike. He cursed under his breath. "I'm the vice leader. How the hell am I being overshadowed by that oversized kid?" Meanwhile, Seraph Warrior had already downed 3 more enemies, and even Slashblade had managed to snipe one with a combination of Smite and Curse of Agony. Skyblade's patience snapped. He lunged forward with a charge, following up with heroic strike as he barreled into the melee. His sword glinted with a savage red light as he cleaved through a mage, sending the unfortunate caster flying backward. Without missing a beat, Skyblade chased after the mage's crumpling form. Death blow activated, his one-handed sword glowing fiercely as it struck the target mid-air. The mage collapsed on impact, their body dissolving into light. Skyblade turned toward his next victim, his eyes blazing with ruthless determination. Gone was the carefree, joking player they all knew. Skyblade tore through 6-7 enemies in quick succession. His skill rotation was seamless, not a single interruption breaking the flow. He didn't even bother with basic attacks. Every move was calculated to perfection, his cooldown management a masterclass in efficiency. Seraph Warrior was no slouch either. With Crusader Strike, Shockwave, Judgment, and his signature Executioner's Cleave, he carved through the enemy ranks like a hot knife through butter. Executioner's Cleave had been his favorite move since their first raid on Zone 1370, where he fell in love with its brutal finality. By chaining the stagger effects of Shockwave and Judgment, each lasting only fractions of a second, he created an opening to land decapitating blows on his enemies. Granted, this trick worked best against poorly equipped opponents. Most of the players here were cloth-wearing classes, easy prey for his blade. Once players started donning full armor sets later in the game, this flashy move would lose its effectiveness. But for now, against newbie players in starter gear, Executioner's Cleave was a guaranteed one-shot kill. Spells rained down around them, explosions of fire and lightning erupting in bursts of chaos. Yet neither Skyblade nor Seraph Warrior flinched. With their guild's number 1 healer, Slashblade, watching their backs, they had nothing to fear. As guild officers, their gear was among the best Renegade Alliance had to offer. Even Meatball, the warlock, sported high-tier gear thanks to his habit of donating money in exchange for contribution points. Against this weak rabble of Blade Syndicate who were mostly priests, it was a massacre. In moments, over 20 Syndicate players were downed, their bodies scattered across the battlefield. Panic erupted among the survivors. The few priests who hadn't been killed outright turned and ran, shouting warnings as they fled. Enemies! It's Renegade Alliance! We can't win this run! The camp descended into chaos. At first, Blade Syndicate had fought back, landing enough hits to chip away at the attackers' health. But with Slashblade's healing keeping their team alive, and the Syndicate players too busy scrambling to defend themselves, the resistance quickly fell apart. Now, most of them were focused solely on running. Ethan, having shifted into panther form, darted around the camp like a predator herding prey. Moving at blinding speed, he intercepted anyone trying to escape, killing them with a single savage bite. The sight of one of their own being instantly killed caused even more chaos among the fleeing players. Those in the back had no idea what was happening up front, leading to panicked shoving and collisions. Skyblade and the rest of the team became wolves among a flock of panicked sheep, cutting down anyone in their path. By the end of the battle, Blade Syndicate's players were completely annihilated. Not a single one dared attempt a corpse revival, too afraid that Renegade Alliance would camp their bodies. Instead, they respawned at the graveyard, enduring the experience reduction penalty as they waited for the killers to leave. It had taken less than 3 minutes for 57 Syndicate players to be wiped out. The 5 victors regrouped, their names glowing bright red from the sin value they'd accumulated. The bloodthirst in their eyes betrayed how much they'd enjoyed the fight. Slashblade, did you record it? Skyblade asked, glancing at the priest, who had stayed back to maintain a full view of the battlefield. Yeah, I got the whole thing, but... Slashblade trailed off, throwing a sheepish look at Skyblade. Skyblade cut in quickly. Boss, when you post the video, could you maybe blur the part where I was crawling on the ground? Just, for image sake. The group burst into laughter. Everyone knew Ethan planned to post the video online. Skyblade, knowing he couldn't stop him, could only plead for some dignity. Sure, no problem, Ethan replied with a grin. Slashblade, send me the video. Chapter 58. Words versus Deeds. Blade Syndicate, I don't care who's backing you. If you want to play, let's play big. Ethan opened the official ethereal forums. Normally, 2 guilds butting heads was nothing unusual. But this time, things were different. The leader of Renegade Alliance, known as Not a Druid, had been dominating the leaderboards since the game's launch. First kills? He'd claimed nearly all of them. And now, the newly crowned top guild in the northern frontier Blade Syndicate had decided to pick a fight. It wasn't just any fight, it was a full-blown guild war. The forums buzzed with chatter. Blade Syndicate's leader, Marcus Skaner, had posted a taunting video earlier. It showed off his team's flashy combat skills, capped with a challenge. The post exploded with comments, holding the top spot on the forum. Ethan clicked the Create Post button. His title was simple and bold. Renegade Alliance doesn't rely on numbers. To crush Blade Syndicate, 5 are enough. He attached a video, followed by a single caption. Timestamp, 21:43. Kills, 57. Initially, the post was drowned in the flood of forum activity. Barely anyone noticed it, but 10 minutes later, curiosity prevailed. It resurfaced, drawing attention for one reason. The poster's name, not a druid. That name carried weight. It was the rookie legend everyone had been talking about. The video started with Skyblade charging into battle. His back was turned, but the intensity was palpable. Then came the carnage. A warlock summoned Demonic Guardian unleashed a blade storm, cutting down 6 enemies in seconds. The shield tank flowed effortlessly through combat, each skill landing with pinpoint precision. Every enemy move preempted. A paladin's basic strikes drove foes into disarray, capitalizing on milliseconds of stagger to deliver devastating executions. The screen flared red as decapitated heads rolled, blood spraying like fireworks. And then there was the Black Panther. Its every strike was a kill, its damage numbers absurdly high. It appeared and vanished like a shadow, spreading panic in the opposing ranks. In contrast, Blade Syndicate's players were chaos incarnate. They shoved, scrambled, and collapsed like a herd of panicked sheep. The difference in skill was striking. A particular highlight was the warlock in glasses, a plump and very young figure. His summoning skills were overwhelming. 1 Demonic Guardian, 2 Void Lords, 3 Succubi, 4 Hellhounds and 10 Imps. His summons were a literal demon army. But he wasn't just a summoner. His Destruction Bolt reduced health bars to slivers. Though its casting time left him vulnerable, the power behind it was unmatched. This was the strength of Renegade Alliance. Among the chaos, Ethan stood out in his understated way. Unlike the others, he wasn't flashy. He didn't need to be. His panther form tore through enemies like a whirlwind. His kills precise and methodical. No one escaped. And yet, anyone with an eye for combat could tell. This fight's pace was dictated by the panther. It exploited fear, scattering Blade Syndicate's formation until they were herded together like cattle. When the dust settled, Blade Syndicate's 57 players were wiped out in under 3 minutes, a feat unheard of in Ethereal's early stages, where gear wasn't strong enough to dominate so completely. It seemed to hint at another battle on the horizon. Their 5-man performance wasn't over yet. And then there was the title of Ethan's post. Renegade Alliance doesn't rely on numbers. To crush Blade Syndicate, 5 are enough. A single sentence, arrogant, bold, and brimming with confidence. It stirred something in people, making their blood pump faster. In no time, Ethan's post and Marcus Skainer's earlier taunt became the hottest topics on the Ethereal forums. Players abandoned their quests and rushed back to safe zones just to refresh the thread, desperate to see how things would end. Ethan's post wasn't just a declaration. It was a slap in the face to Blade Syndicate, whose reputation relied on overwhelming numbers. It was like saying, "You like ganging up on smaller groups, huh? Fine. We'll leave just 5 of us to deal with you." Everyone knew how this started. Blade Syndicate had picked the fight, killing Renegade Alliance players unprovoked. Skyblade led a counterattack with a few dozen players, wiping out over 100 from Blade Syndicate. Humiliated, Blade Syndicate retaliated. They rallied over 1,500 members to hunt down Renegade Alliance's 200. The odds seemed impossible, and many expected a swift end to the fight. But it didn't end. The battle raged for an entire day. Renegade Alliance lost a few dozen players, but no one knew how many Blade Syndicate had lost in return. While Renegade Alliance members fought and dodged pursuit, Blade Syndicate filled the forums with boasts. They even started spreading rumors about Ethan. The stories were absurd. Not a druid had supposedly been hospitalized after being caught with another man's wife. Some claimed he'd been hit by a car. The insults and curses were endless. Newer players still stuck in starter zones tried to defend Renegade Alliance on the forums, but they were drowned out by Blade Syndicate's constant trolling. It was impossible to argue with them. These people didn't think before they spoke. They'd say anything, no matter how ridiculous. Ironically, it was Blade Syndicate's hate-filled replies that pushed Ethan's post to the top of the forums. Ethan read through the comments, a cold smile tugging at his lips. "Keep talking. You'll be eating your words soon enough." The post reignited Renegade Alliance's morale. They cheered. Even if Ethan did nothing else after this, they wouldn't blame him. As for those who had left the guild, regret began to creep in. They reached out to old teammates, hoping to smooth things over and rejoin. But the replies they got were far from welcoming. "Piss off!" One particularly fiery former member shot back through a private chat. Ethan and his team were already back underwater, navigating through the submerged caves. 10 minutes later, they surfaced in another pond, emerging near a larger camp. As before, Ethan went ahead to eliminate the sentries while Skyblade and the others prepared for the assault. This time, the camp was far larger than the previous one. The enemies weren't just weak priest-class players. The camp was packed with 129 enemies, with 34 sentries alone. The numbers were overwhelming. Even with Skyblade's well-equipped team, they couldn't ignore such a massive gap. Chapter 59, God of Slaughter. Ethan couldn't repeat his previous battle tactic of picking off stragglers from the edges of the fight. This time, to protect his team, he stepped onto the battlefield, targeting anyone who posed a threat. 5 minutes later, the chaos was over. Out of 129 enemies, only 11 escaped. Skyblade took down 13. Seraph Warrior eliminated 15. Slashblade snatched 3 kills. And Meatball surprisingly managed to rack up 24 kills, second only to Ethan himself. Ethan, however, was in a league of his own, slaying a staggering 63 players from the Carnage faction. His sharp gaze lingered briefly on Meatball, impressed by his performance despite his unassuming appearance. Afterward, Ethan updated his forum post, adding a new video beneath the one he had uploaded earlier. He appended a single sentence. Time: 22:07. Total kills: 118. Blade Syndicate, show your proof, or your words are nothing but a joke. The forum exploded. As they had expected, this fight wasn't over. Earlier, after Ethan's first video, Marcus Gaynor had edited his own post, boasting about taking down 58 members of Renegade Alliance. The implication was clear. He wanted to overshadow Ethan's achievement.
Forum Ripley Power in, demanding Marcus Upolak proof.
Ethan's update made his stance equally clear. No proof, no bragging rights. After finishing his post, Ethan glanced at his teammates. Slashblade and the others were busy looting the battlefield, so he joined in, aiming to wrap up quickly and move to the next location. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed movement. From the nearby woods, another squad of over 70 Blade Syndicate players emerged, heading straight for them. This was a backup unit stationed closest to the camp. They had assumed the original 100-plus players stationed here could hold their ground for a while. But as they stepped out of the trees and onto the open plains near the pond, they froze, stunned. This wasn't what they had expected. It had only been 5 minutes since they received the distress call. And yet, the camp had been annihilated. The only players left on the battlefield were 5 from the Renegade Alliance, calmly gathering loot. Their names floated above them, written in a blood-red hue so dark it seemed almost black. The sight was chilling, like a nightmare made real. Ethan moved instantly. Before the enemy could react, he activated stealth, charging toward the group with blinding speed. If not for his stealth ability, they would have seen what looked like a streak of black lightning. By the time Ethan reappeared, he was already in their midst. Rake! Blood sprayed across the faces of nearby players. The priest Ethan ambushed clutched his throat, collapsing lifelessly to the ground. Ethan had learned something during these battles. Every skill had hidden techniques that could amplify its effectiveness. In his previous life, he had played as a rogue, mastering the intricacies of the class's abilities. But this time, the system, or rather, that nosy old man had forced him into the druid class. At first, he thought his rogue tricks wouldn't apply to a druid. But after several fights, Ethan discovered that wasn't entirely true. Take Rake, for example. When used in stealth, the skill caused both a stun and a bleed effect. Officially, it wasn't supposed to deal any direct damage. However, during an earlier fight, Ethan instinctively treated it like a rogue's throat-slitting skill. To his surprise, the results were incredible. When he raked his claws across his opponent's neck, it caused direct damage. A critical hit, no less. Unfortunately, these enemies were so poorly geared that they couldn't withstand even a single attack. It made it impossible for Ethan to gauge the upper limits of his critical damage potential. Most of these players had between 360 and 400 HP. As damage-dealing classes, they rarely invested stat points into stamina, relying instead on the 2 attribute points granted per level to boost their stats. At level 15, that left them with only about 30 stamina. And with a standard growth rate of 12 HP per stamina point, their health pools were laughably small. Ethan, on the other hand, was on a completely different level. Thanks to the divine bloodline he'd acquired at the start, his growth rate was 20 HP per stamina point. His durability was leagues above theirs. After his ambush on the first priest ended in an instant kill, Ethan faded into stealth again before anyone could react. Reappearing beside a second priest, he unleashed a brutal swipe. Squelch. Blood sprayed like a fountain as Ethan's claws tore through the priest's chest, splitting it open with terrifying force. The group of over 70 players froze in horror. This druid wasn't just strong, he was downright savage. One moment, Ethan had been dozens of meters away. The next, he was in their midst, delivering 2 attacks that instantly killed 2 of their priests. The first kill was shocking enough, with the priest's throat torn open. But the second? It was a scene of pure carnage. The priest's chest had been ripped apart, blood drenching everyone nearby. The metallic stench of it filled the air, making their stomachs churn. And then there was Ethan's red name, glowing ominously above his head, a sign of just how many players he had killed. The fear was palpable. The group instinctively began retreating, shuffling backward as they hurled desperate attacks in Ethan's direction. A flurry of spells shot toward him, their glowing streaks of light exploding on contact. Boom! 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 The damage notifications floated mockingly above Ethan's head. He was 7 levels above them, with multiple pieces of gear enhanced to plus 30. Their attacks barely scratched him, reduced to the minimum force damage. Ethan charged headlong into the crowd, ignoring the onslaught of spells and arrows. Like a ferocious panther tearing through a helpless flock, he slaughtered them without mercy. Wherever he passed, players scattered like leaves in the wind, desperate to escape. Due to his panther form, Ethan's movement speed had soared to 140%. There was no way they could outrun him. Ding. System notification. Kills have reached 100. You've earned the unique achievement title, God of Slaughter. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. God of Slaughter? Was this the same title from his previous life? Still in the thick of combat, he quickly brought up the title details. Title, God of Slaughter, unique. Hidden attribute. Grants freedom to fight with your body, no longer limited by skill constraints. If the player has already ascended, this attribute increases physical control by 50%. Description. The mantle of a god of slaughter demands exceptional soul power to wield. Ethan frowned. In his past life, this title hadn't offered any attributes. What had changed? Exceptional soul power, he muttered. Could it be that the previous title holder hadn't had enough soul power to unlock its hidden potential? It made sense. Perhaps the soul power he had accumulated in this life had finally found its use here. As he pieced it together, Ethan couldn't help but grin. With this title, his freedom in combat would skyrocket, effectively giving him abilities that should only be available post-ascension. Normally, to gain such combat freedom, players needed to ascend to advanced classes. For example, a rogue would need to become a shadow dancer, freeing their skills from rigid activation requirements and granting the ability to chain moves fluidly, or even create custom combos. But ascension wasn't easy. Players had to pass multiple trials and complete a divine-level quest to earn the system's recognition. And that wasn't the worst of it. The final step required collecting rare materials, with varying levels of difficulty. The harder the difficulty, the more resources were needed. Of course, that brought another factor into play: wealth. If you were broke, fine. You could settle for the easiest ascension route. But taking the easiest path meant your post-ascension attributes and rewards would pale in comparison to those who could afford the higher difficulties. Chapter 60. Predator's Dance. What came after a druid's advancement? Ethan had no idea. In his past life, across 4 years, he had never once heard of a successful druid class transition. Shrugging off the thought, he equipped his God of Slaughter title and flexed his panther form, moving with effortless agility. He shifted between different stances, testing the limits of his body, weaving in and out of movement seamlessly. At one point, he even started messing around, fighting with moves that shouldn't even count as attacks. Like now, with a casual flick of his tail, He whipped a player's legs out from under them. The guy crashed to the ground hard, and somehow took damage. Ethan blinked. Wait, that worked. Sure, it wasn't much, but that was just a tail swipe. Chuckling, he finished the poor bastard off with 2 basic claw strikes. Then, leaping into the air, he landed directly on another player's shoulders, his hind legs locking around their neck. Before they could react, his claws flashed, throat slit. The moment he hit the ground, he kicked off with his back legs, sending another enemy flying as they tried to run. His movements were fluid, perfectly instinctual. A true hunter at work. And Ethan? He was feeling himself. But to Slashblade and the others watching, it looked like something else entirely. That's a druid? Skyblade stared, his brain struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. Even Slashblade, normally unshakable, wore an expression of pure disbelief. Slash, you recording this? Asked Seraph Warrior, eyes locked on the action. Of course I am, Slashblade muttered. Seraph Warrior exhaled in relief. Good. Because this is the moment boss shuts everyone up. People had always mocked him, called him a bug abuser, a player with 0 real skill, relying only on exploits. Now, let's see what they had to say after this. Meanwhile, Meatball practically had stars in his eyes. It was pure admiration. Should we help? Skyblade asked, gripping his weapon. Slashblade scoffed. Help? Are you blind? Look at him. Boss is having the time of his life. Besides, there were barely any enemies left. And the fact that Slashblade just casually called Ethan boss? Yeah. Skyblade and Seraph Warrior definitely noticed. He wasn't the type to casually refer to anyone with such honorifics. They exchanged knowing glances, but before either could comment, Slashblade scratched his nose. What are you two looking at? Just enjoy the damn show. Oh, nice combo. Smooth. Real smooth. And yeah, their attention did snap back to the fight, because Ethan had switched things up again. Now, he wasn't just relying on Panther form. The last remaining Blade Syndicate player had gotten a head start, sprinting away. Ethan transformed mid-run. Night Owl form. With a flick of his feather, he cast Bramble Bind. He preemptively cast it 1/2 meter in front of the fleeing target. The moment they stepped on it, the vines snapped tight. This guy was smarter than the others. Instead of panicking, he immediately drew his sword and started hacking at the brambles. But Ethan had already shifted back to Panther form, rapidly closing the distance. And the second the vines were destroyed, Bear form, the guy barely had time to process it before Ethan charged. Boom! The force of the impact pinned them in place. Charge activated. Target immobilized. Plus 15 rage. Now for the finisher. Swipe. Maul activated. The massive bear rose onto its hind legs. Ethan brought both paws down, directly on the player's skull, bursting his head like a rotten fruit. Blood splattered across his furred chest, streaks of red and yellow painting the coarse hair. He exhaled. Yeah, that felt right. As he suspected, none of his bear skills mentioned dealing direct damage. But if you knew what you were doing, you didn't need a damage number to kill someone. Just like Seraph Warrior, who loved decapitating people, Ethan had his own style. And right now, he was just getting started. Ethan was getting the hang of it. And it showed. His excitement was barely contained as he moved effortlessly through the chaos. Minutes later, he edited his 3rd post on the game's official forums. This time, he added a new video beneath the previous one. With a simple caption. Time. 22:29. Kills. 78. And the Renegade Alliance 5 were still going. The numbers kept rising, and every time Ethan updated the post with another kill count and another video, the entire player base was left in shock. Renegade Alliance. These guys are insane. Was this even real? Players couldn't forget how Renegade Alliance had declared war the moment they left the starter zone. Their first guild battle igniting a server-wide conflict. But after that, things had been quiet. Until now. Until Blade Syndicate made the mistake of mocking them, assuming Renegade Alliance had gone soft after their guildmaster disappeared for 10 whole days. And then today happened. The moment Not a Druid, the most renowned rising star of the game, came back online. He was already level 22, instantly reclaiming the #1 spot on the level leaderboard. The rumors of cheating spread again. People accused him of using exploits, hacks, hidden mechanics. But then the videos dropped. And suddenly, the entire forum fell silent. No one spoke. because what they saw was something they had never imagined possible. A druid using what looked like martial arts. A one-man slaughterhouse. People were already blown away when they saw Seraph Warrior's clean executions in the first video. His flawless decapitations leaving enemies crumpled before they even realized what happened. But then they saw Ethan. And the conversation ended. Because no one could say shit anymore. Meanwhile, Marcus Skaner was losing his mind. He had taken bribes to slow down Renegade Alliance, confident that Ethan's 10-day absence had made him irrelevant. In his head, even if Ethan came back, he'd be so far behind that he wouldn't matter anymore. But reality? Not only was Ethan still on top, he had a 7-level lead over Blade Syndicate's strongest players. There was a very real chance that, at this moment, Ethan was the highest-leveled player in the world. And that wasn't even the worst part. Marcus Skaner couldn't understand how Ethan's damage and defense were this high. What kind of gear did he have? What kind of build was this? Of course, what Marcus Skaner didn't know was that Ethan's armor wasn't even fully equipped. His ridiculous stats came from a few plus 30 enhanced pieces, nothing more. And now, the 5 of them had turned this entire war upside down. The moment Ethan posted those videos to the official forums, Marcus Skaner had lost control of the narrative. He had gone from hunter to hunted. And now, he was stuck. If he attacked, he wouldn't even know where to find them. If he retreated, the humiliation would be permanent. Renegade Alliance would never let him live it down. His entire guild would be labeled as the 1,500-man army that got chased away by just 5 players. His entire career would be finished. There was only one way forward. Find them. Kill them. Erase this. If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.